Chapter 1, The Troubled Christmas Stay of a Young Woman. Victoria was driving the car, attentive at all times to the instructions of the GPS, while a big snowfall fell on the road through which it passed. The girl was quite frustrated, and not for the first time since she took the car she had rented at the Aberdeen airport she regretted having accepted that invitation. Beside her, in the passenger seat, Nancy slept, snoring rather loudly. Victoria looked at her out of the corner of her eye and then extended an arm to shake her a little. "Nancy, wake up!" Victoria exclaimed in an energetic tone and with some annoyance. Nancy woke up complaining like a girl her mother had woken up to go to school on a Monday. "Hell, Vicky! I was having an erotic dream and the best part was coming," protested Nancy, looking angry. "And you snore when you have an erotic dream? Normally I excitedly moan when I have a dream like that. No wonder that no boyfriend stays by your side for a long time." Victoria replied half seriously and half jokingly. "Haha. You're very funny. Are we already arriving?" Nancy asked as she stretching her arms. "According to the GPS, there is still a long way to go. I just wanted to wake you up so you were conscious before you died," Victoria answered with a gesture of frustration on her face. "Die? Did you take any drugs with coffee this morning?" Nancy replied impatiently and mockingly. "No, simply that if it continues to snow in this way and the visibility continues to worsen, I cannot rule out that the car will get damaged and we are found frozen dead at the roadside. A nice Christmas present," Victoria replied with a snort. "Victoria, do not be a party pooper. Besides, I detest that people are bitter in December. I hate Mr. Scrooge," Nancy exclaimed with an ironic smile. "I do not know why I agreed to come. This is crazy. I gave up spending Christmas with my family to accept the invitation of that crazy billionaire, and if that was not enough, the guy makes us come to one of the coldest places in the country in a particularly harsh winter. Who the hell celebrates Christmas in a castle hidden in such an abrupt place? Is he the Count Dracula?" Victoria said irritably at having to make that trip between Aberdeen and a place near Cairngorm Mountain, in the north of Scotland. "Vicky, do not be silly, you know perfectly well because we're here. Or is it that you know another investor who is willing to invest money in our project? It's the dream of your life, Vicky, and you know perfectly well that you would go to hell to make it happen," Nancy replied. "Maybe we'll go today if it keeps snowing like that," exclaimed Victoria. Nancy gave a small mocking moan and then snorted, rolling her eyes, making Victoria unable to suppress an amused smile. Nancy started talking about other things to distract Victoria, who got a little excited. After a few minutes Victoria's cell phone rang, and after seeing the origin of the call on the screen, she activated the hands-free function to answer the call. "Hello, Mama," said Victoria. "Hello, sweetness," said Victoria's mother. "Hi, Mrs. Louise," said Nancy. "Are you listening, Nancy?" "Hello to you too, sweetness. But you have not arrived yet?" Victoria's mother asked. "No, Mom, we're almost there, but we need a bit to get there. It's snowing a lot so I have to go slow. But according to GPS and weather conditions, I think we'll arrive in half an hour," said Victoria, being more reassuring with herself than with her mother. At her residence in London, Victoria's mother was talking on her own cell phone, also using the hands-free function while sitting on a sofa in the living room, unpacking some Christmas decorations she had bought to add to her already ornate Christmas decorations. "Drive very carefully, Vicky. Did you remember to pack enough warm clothes? And you carry quite an underwear clean?" asked Victoria's mother, who had an astonishing resemblance to Queen Victoria's governess, Baroness Lazen. "Mom, I'm not a girl anymore," Victoria exclaimed embarrassed while Nancy laughed out loud. "All right, hey, Vicky. I was seeing photos of that guy you're going to see and he's very handsome, besides he's single. I'm just saying, that you do not have to close yourself to opportunities that do not come every day," said Victoria's mother, trying to sound a little joker, but speaking more seriously than I wanted to admit. "Mom, please. I'm not looking for a husband," Victoria replied impatiently. "Just make sure he is not gay like the last one," Victoria's father exclaimed in a tone of disgust while turning the page of the newspaper he was reading. He was sitting in an armchair next to the sofa on which his wife was sitting, and he had an undeniable resemblance to the late Duke of Wellington. "Dad? Really? Are you really telling me that? Do not get tired of rubbing it in my face," exclaimed Victoria, raising her voice angrily. "I'm just saying that," Victoria's father began to reply. "Arthur, enough!" exclaimed Victoria's mother, scolding her husband. "Leave the girl alone. Vicky, do not pay attention to your father's fool. He's still upset because you will not spend Christmas with us. You just enjoy your trip and hope you have luck with your project." "Goodbye, Nancy," Victoria's mother said goodbye affectionately. Nancy and Victoria said goodbye to Victoria's mother with affection, and then they were silent for a moment, while Nancy looked askance at Victoria, who stayed serious. 4 months earlier, in the middle of summer, Victoria had come to her house unexpectedly and had found her boyfriend Albert in the shower with another man. Victoria reacted like a caged beast and ended up breaking a bottle in Albert's head while his lover was running away naked from the apartment. The conclusion of the incident was Albert in the hospital, where he was stitched several surgical sutures in the head, Victoria sleeping one night in the police station, and a couple of days later Victoria picking up her things from Albert's apartment to live in her parents' house, again. "Vicky, honey, you'll see that it will be a very happy Christmas for everyone. Your dream will come true at last," said Nancy lovingly while stroking the arm of her friend. "I hope. It would be good if something good happens to me, for a change, but you're right. I must have a positive mind, because if we've come this far I cannot let my bad attitude spoil this opportunity," Victoria said seriously, and then relaxed the gesture of her face and turned to see her friend with a friendly smile. A while later Victoria's car and her friend arrived at the gate that gave access to a walled property, and Victoria clicked the video intercom button. A woman answered the call, and after she heard Victoria identify herself, she activated the opening of the gate, and Victoria drove the car inside the property. The car went down the road that led to the mansion. On both sides of the road stretched meadows that were now covered with a thick layer of snow. The road itself had been cleared by a snowplow machine a couple of hours before. The girls were impressed to see the mansion, a huge and imposing mansion similar to the one in the series Downton Abbey. Victoria parked the car near the main entrance of the mansion, while employees who had left the mansion came to pick up the luggage of Victoria and Nancy, and take it to the house. When they crossed the threshold of the mansion's main entrance, Victoria and Nancy were greeted by a thin, middle-aged lady, very friendly. "Good afternoon, Miss Victoria, Miss Nancy. I'm Emma White, the housekeeper. Mr. Cartwright asked me to apologize you, on his behalf, for not receiving you in person because of his schedule, but he will meet you for the dinner," said Emma. Victoria and Nancy were taken to the guest bedrooms assigned by Emma and several maids who helped carry the luggage of the two girls. The friends marveled at the sumptuousness of the bedrooms, with huge canopy beds and a very elegant and classic furniture in general, and beautiful paintings on the walls that depicted bucolic scenes of the British countryside in the 18th and 19th centuries. A couple of hours later Victoria and Nancy were waiting for the host, standing at the entrance of the mansion's huge dining room, and Nancy commented admiringly on the size and luxury of the room, which had a rich and beautiful Christmas decoration, when a man approached stealthily to them from behind. "I'm afraid, it's nothing in front of the Queen's dining room in Buckingham," the man said smilingly. Victoria and Nancy turned around a bit startled, and Victoria was almost hypnotized to see the green eyes of the man who saw her with an intense gaze. "Hello, it's a pleasure to meet you, young ladies. I'm William Cartwright," said the tall, handsome man with green eyes, who smiled charmingly but who did not stop looking at Victoria with a gaze intense and even a little intimidating. "Hello, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Cartwright. I'm Nancy Sutton, said Nancy, extending her arm to shake William's hand. William and Nancy greeted each other cordially, but Victoria was paralyzed and silent, so Nancy felt a little embarrassed and, in a veiled way, she nudged Victoria to react. "Excuse me, Mr. Cartwright, I'm Victoria Doherty. It is a pleasure to meet you." When they shook their hands, Victoria felt as if an electric shock ran through her body and her skin bristled. In addition, Victoria's heart quickened. "It's a pleasure to have you here, Miss Victoria and Miss Nancy. I must apologize to you for having brought you here, with this climate, and that you must be away from your families this Christmas. I hope to make your stay very pleasant. I'm waiting for another guest, to start dinner," said William very kindly. "Excuse me, Mr. Cartwright," Victoria began to say. "William, please. I hate that my guests call me Mr. Cartwright, especially if it is someone I respect and admire," William replied with a charming smile and a virilely seductive gaze. "William," Victoria said, swallowing thick as she tried to relax and slow down her racing heart. "By chance, have not we met before?" Victoria asked with genuine curiosity. "Well, I do not think I," William said, becoming a little nervous, and to Victoria's surprise his voice broke and even she noticed that his eyes seemed to get wet. "I'm here, William." "Sorry for the delay," said a handsome young man as he approached them. "That good. Ladies, let me introduce you to," said William, who seemed relieved by the appearance of the man. "Matteo Francatelli," Nancy exclaimed enthusiastically and stepped forward, almost pushing Victoria, who looked at her surprised. "Excuse me, but I am a great fan of yours, Mr. Francatelli," she added, a little embarrassed by her initial outburst. "Don't worry, miss. I love knowing that I have fans in Britain. In Italy I have a few, but here few people know me," said Francatelli, smiling. "Don't be modest, Matteo, you have many fans in Italy and here they know you more than you think," said William, laughing. Only Victoria seemed not to know who Francatelli was. "Vicky, he is the star of that Italian series of detectives, prosecutors, corrupt politicians, and mafiosi that I like it so much, and it about which I have spoken you. The one I see in my favorite application. He is the prosecutor Cominardi," Nancy said, as if it were absurd that Victoria did not know. "I'm going to blush, bella signorina," exclaimed Francatelli with a small laugh. William invited them to enter the dining room to start dinner. The food was pleasant and the four talked cheerfully, but it was evident that between Francatelli and Nancy there was a lot of chemistry, and between Victoria and William there was also a more subtle magnetism, but at the same time intense and strange, as if they both felt a very old chemistry and inexplicable, contained by a certain timidity or discomfort, like two lovers very much in love with each other who had separated and had reunited after 10 years. The evening was finished early so that the girls could rest after their trip, while William and Francatelli were left drinking whiskey and smoking cigars. Nancy and Victoria met for a few minutes in the bedroom assigned to Victoria, exchanging impressions about the men they had just met. "The two are charming," said Nancy, lying on the bed next to Victoria. "Yes, but do not you find it strange that there are no more guests? It will be that they brought us with the hope that we will be their divertissement in the nights that remain for Christmas, to hot their beds," said Victoria, half seriously and half jokingly. "Victoria, let's be honest, you and I are not bad. For us to be just under 30 years of age we are reasonably beautiful women, but we honestly do not play in the Premier League. A handsome and multi-millionaire man and a famous and also handsome actor, they can have spectacular women, models of Playboy or Victoria's Secret. Why would they prefer women like us who we are not competitors for Adriana Lima? Also, if Matteo needs a pre-Christmas gift, maybe I'll be willing to give it to him," said Nancy, mocking and naughty. "You surprise me, Nancy. Where was my Puritan friend who hates promiscuity?" Victoria said mockingly and pretending scandal. "I'm just kidding," Nancy exclaimed, getting up and walking towards the door. "Or not," she said with malice, turning to see Victoria and winking at her. I'm going to sleep, alone, and you should do the same if tomorrow you want to convince William with reasons and words and not with your body. Sometime later Victoria was sleeping soundly when suddenly she began to dream. She was in large rooms, very ornate with antique and luxurious furniture. Victoria felt that this place did not correspond to this time. She was convinced that not only was it a place where she had not been before in this life, but it was also another era. Victoria noticed that in that place it was also Christmas because there was Christmas decoration in all the rooms of that huge and sumptuous building. The decoration was also ancient, it did not belong to the present. For example, instead of electric Christmas lights, there were candles. There were at least 2 huge Christmas trees, 2 beautiful natural pine that seemed recently felled, much better than those artificial plastic pine that many people prefer today. Victoria could almost smell the fragrance of the 2 pine, they decorated with garlands and many ornaments of bright and striking colors. Victoria contemplated that beauty enraptured and felt that she was immersed in an oniric scene, a scene from a film or television performance of A Christmas Carol. Then she began to hear the voice of a woman, a very familiar voice, that seemed to call someone. Surprised, Victoria began to look for the source of that voice, going through the salons and the long corridors, but did not see anyone. Instead, she began to hear the voice of a little girl calling her mother, and that was when she saw at the end of a long corridor a woman and a girl, both on their backs, holding hands, both dressed in clothes that looked ancient when it is seen from behind, especially the woman whose dress almost reached her feet. Victoria felt the impulse to run towards them, but then she felt a deep sorrow and an anxious fear, and woke up from sleep. Slowly Victoria opened her eyes, in that state that is halfway between sleeping and being awake. When she woke up a little more, she recognized the guest bedroom in which she was staying in the darkness, and reached out to find the glass of water in a small piece of furniture next to her bed. But at that moment she heard the muffled sound of the voices she had heard in her dream, the familiar voice of the woman and the voice of the girl. Victoria turned to see the door of the bedroom because it seemed that it was the place where the voices came from, which they also seemed to be muffled by the door since the woman and the girl seemed to be behind it. With a mixture of surprise, fear, and curiosity, Victoria got out of bed and stood up, putting her feet, covered by socks, on the floor. She walked very slowly the few steps that separated the bed from the door, with her heart very fast and her skin bristling. Increasing her astonishment, Victoria saw how the bedroom seemed to have been submerged in a thin mist, a mist that a few moments before was not there. Victoria extended her right arm and with shaking hand activated the door handle, and cautiously opened the door. Then something amazing happened. Victoria was in the middle of a large room, with the same style as the others as she had seen in her dreams. She saw figures in profile, a man sitting in an armchair and to whom she could not see the face. The girl and the woman of her dreams were standing in front of the man, and the 3 seemed to converse, but she did not understand the words that were heard as far away and interrupted by a sound like a strong wind. Victoria was focused on the figures when the woman seemed to notice her presence and slowly turned her head to see Victoria. And Victoria's heart was about to explode. The face she was seeing was her own face, the face of that woman was Victoria's face, absolutely identical. The woman seemed to be her twin sister, a twin sister of course non-existent. And the gaze of the woman was an intense look, full of mixed emotions, but especially of sadness and nostalgia. Terribly frightened, Victoria stepped back as if she were going to turn around to run, but then her legs failed her and Victoria fell to the floor sitting. And suddenly everything around her moved like a whirlwind, the view of Victoria became blurred and when she managed to focus it again, Victoria again suffered a great surprise. To begin with, she realized that her feet were no longer covered by socks, but that they were barefoot, with the soles of her feet feeling the surface of a rough stone floor very different from the floor of the mansion's bedroom. Then Victoria saw that she was not dressed in the pajamas she wore when she got out of bed, but with a strange dress that seemed very ancient, from a time that at that time was not able to identify. In addition, a kind of veil covered her head, and to her dismay, Victoria saw that around her there were several people seeing her, mostly men, inside a room of a strange building. Victoria felt afraid when she heard a man's voice calling her in what seemed like a strange language, a voice that nevertheless sounded reassuring. Victoria, still sitting on the floor, turned to see where the voice came from, and then the light emanating from a transfigured figure dazzled her. Startled, Victoria woke up again with a racing heart, but to her amazement she was lying on her back on the floor of the mansion's guest bedroom, dressed in her pajamas and her feet covered with socks. Victoria sat up on the floor and felt her pajamas with her hands and then touched her head looking for the veil she wore in the last part of the dream, but it was not there. She would have believed that it had been a very vivid dream if it had not been because she was on the floor and not in the bed, in front of the bedroom door, and that the door was open. Through the open door, Nancy appeared wearing pajamas and stretching her arms while yawning. Nancy was going to say hello when she saw Victoria on the floor and opened her eyes in surprise. "Victoria, but, what the hell are you doing on the floor?" Nancy asked, puzzled. Victoria was in huge confusion.